Yep.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Town of Andover Board of Finance meeting, the regular meeting, Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. We'll call the meeting to order and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag,
United States of
America,
States of America,
States of
to the
America,
to the
republic
republic
that
that
stands
stands
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty.
liberty and justice for
for
all.
all.
Okay, thank you. First order of business is public speak. I do not see any members of the public present. So I guess we will move on to item 3, which is changes and additions to the agenda. Does anybody have any proposed changes or additions to the agenda?
I don't this time. I'm all set.
Okay. All right, well, hearing none, we'll move on to the town administrator's report. So Eric, I see you included quite a bit of stuff in the packet. You also had Kate forward some things this morning about the legislative activities, which I'm sure we'll talk about under that topic. I haven't had a chance to read through all of this, some of it. Do you want to give us a summary?
Sure. So you all have it in your packet. The biggest thing we've had to deal with lately is the fact that the town did get a full-blown OSHA inspection of town buildings. They've inspected public works before, but they've never inspected any of the other public buildings. So our initial bill for corrective actions is around $26,000. Which is a big chunk of the building maintenance fund, but ultimately we don't really have any choice. No idea what our initial rounds of fines are going to be for this. The per violation fine right now for pretty much all violations is up to $16,500 each. So absolute worst case scenario, we'd be at around $300,000 in fines. Seems highly unlikely we're going to be anywhere near that. But I would expect that they're going to come back with an initial fine proposal of, $50,000 to $70,000, of which we will be able to demonstrate that we have corrected every single issue that they've identified prior to our follow-on meeting. And judging by what other towns have done, my guess is we're going to get the total fine violations for the town down to somewhere around a $15,000 fine, which we'll handle from contingency. But I could be wildly off, high or low on that number. So questions on that?
Yeah, what kind of violations did we end up with? Sounds like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that's actually not a lot, crazy as it sounds. So in the town hall and the library, the majority of the violations were for overusing extension cords. Because frankly, we do
that'll do it. Yeah.
in a lot of offices. Fortunately, we didn't have any heaters, but we did have several things like microwaves plugged into power strips. And basically some of those, I don't know whether they're going to be violations or not, because they actually take the nameplates of everything plugged into the power strip and go back and see whether we're over the load rating of that particular power strip. So we're clearly going to get some. They did identify one of our emergency exit lights that was not functional. So that one's a definite violation. And we got a violation for the town clerk's office being too cluttered. And that is considered an OSHA violation, in addition to one of the closets, also in the town clerk's office.
Eric, if I could ask a question, I know that in the town that I work with, we have a walkthrough by our fire department and our fire marshal that will point out those exact things. I mean, it's interesting to me that in such a small town like this and how our fire department people are right there, that we don't have someone walk through in a preliminary way because we have an inspection every year at the school that I work in. And there are those certain things like that, like too many plugs, too many things plugged into the cord, like you said. So we're
Sure.
preemptive on that all the time. It's kind of shocking to me that we would let it get to the point that OSHA comes in so that the town's gonna get fined. It sounds like,
OSHA's gonna, anytime OSHA walks into a workplace, you're gonna get some fines. Because they're gonna keep going until they find something wrong. They have
Sure.
to justify their salary.
right, is OSHA once a year? I'm just trying to see how this would happen. Because those are, whenever we hear we're gonna have an inspection, right away, I would look around my office and say, is it cluttered? Do I have, we know not to plug things in,
I have
so,
to,
yeah,
This
just
is-
trying to see.
it just freezes
We-
constantly. I can't even hear what's going on.
As far as I know, the only
I know,
OSHA
we know that.
inspection the town's ever
She
gone
trying to
through,
say
and I don't know what
What is
happened
this?
at
What is
Bill,
this
we
thing
can
over
hear
here?
you. Can you
really
mute
have in
your-
our town the fire department?
Bill,
Bill,
What's going on?
you're,
Bill.
you're
Yeah.
not muted.
We can
can you
hear
mute
you,
yourself?
Bill.
You're having a second conversation. Okay, thanks.
So,
I'm sorry. So Eric, I didn't hear what you said.
so Public Works was well prepared for an inspection, because that's the only thing that they've ever really inspected in the past. The town hall and the library were less prepared.
So
you
it's
know.
not a once a year thing or something like that, that you're gonna be, it just could be whenever.
As far as I know, the municipal buildings up to now have not ever gotten inspected.
Oh, okay.
So, Public Works is we've spent an enormous amount of money in Public Works over the last 5 years, working off all the problems they have. And Public Works was not cited for anything physical. They, I think we're gonna end up getting cited on a couple of procedures that, they think probably we're at the threshold where we need to do. And I think we're gonna get cited because our eyewash station doesn't have enough capacity to meet new federal OSHA rules. The one that,
Thank you. No, I mean, sorry, I guess it sounds like you didn't, we never know when it's gonna happen. It hasn't happened in the town hall very often, so they're not prepared for that.
yeah, no, we're not on any kind of regular OSHA inspection schedule.
Yeah, I didn't think
Are-
anyone was, right? I thought it was more like a fire thing first and then, no, thank you for explaining the process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Eric,
Denise?
can I just ask you a quick question about it? Do you
Sure.
have your full report back?
we do not.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, I went through one that was very minor when I was operating Cool. And, I got the inspection back and I just very bluntly answered each and every question, told them how I was going to identify how to fix it. And they were fine. So it is a pain, but it's going to be okay. I'm sure it's nothing, that anybody did. You're just going to randomly have them.
Yeah, the problem is
Yeah,
if you have a lot of violations, they'll tend to make return visits, so to be ready.
I did have that question for the inspector about where we stacked up. And he actually said we were one of the best towns he had inspected.
Hmm.
We were way on, we got almost nothing on the areas that they normally, ding towns. I mean, the transfer station had one lower railing on one dumpster wasn't there. But the upper railing was. We said he wouldn't cite us for that. He's like, you could maybe make the argument that we have too much clutter in our oil collection area. But we actually got through the areas where most towns get hammered pretty close to unscathed.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only thing where we were very fortunate in that because the one
Yeah.
thing they always do with Public Works is say, okay, show us all your SDS sheets, and they go randomly find
Right.
whatever chemicals they can. you know, and they go back and look at the book and say, do you have the SDS sheets? So
Right.
Yes, yeah.
where they failed was, or where they weren't, you know, fully compliant, is they didn't have, they hadn't formalized training for all employees on how to read SDS sheets, which is a requirement. And that was, you know, that was definitely an issue on our part. And they will probably get cited for a trip hazard in the old animal control facility, because the old animal control facility was built with a gutter in it, so dog urine and water can run out to the drain. You know, and because they're not using it as an animal control facility, now they have an abrupt change of plane in a room, even though it's up against a fence. So I think we're gonna get hit with that one. So overall, I'm not super concerned. I mean, my goal is to be really proactive. And, you know, when we get to so we should have the formal report back sometime either late this week or early next week, with the intention of setting up a follow-on appointment in a week or so. And then the only real question is, I want to be able to document to him that everything that was pointed out on the walkthrough, and either myself or Jay was with them all of the 2 days, you know, of the inspection, that we've addressed every single thing that he identified, both as a violation and as a, you know, you ought to consider this. So that's kind of been my approach.
Right.
yeah.
You learn from it.
Yep.
Louise, you
Yep.
had your hand up earlier.
Just curious, did they go to the community center?
They did not.
Kristen? Okay,
Don't know why. I think it's a new enough building. It's not on their list of buildings, which is why they didn't. You know,
Do
so
you think they would have found anything?
no, actually, I think the
Probably not, right?
community center is, and I, you know, we walked through
Good.
it afterward, you know, and looked at everything they identified as violations in our regular buildings, and those just aren't really present there.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah,
that's that.
too new.
Yep.
Okay, any other
So-
questions on that topic? Or did you have more?
No, I just wanted to follow up. I thought this was a yearly thing. I didn't understand that Andover wasn't used to this kind of thing. So that's where my line of questioning came from. We have them all the time. So we're not OSHA maybe per se, but like safety inspections.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think
Sure.
it's old hat. So when he said there might be up, if everything got cited, it could be $300,000 worth of fines and like Kim had mentioned, I really feel like you can just, what I've seen from experience is that as long as you have a corrective action to address it, usually if this was like the first time Andover's been subjected to it. Yeah, that's all. I wanted to say that's where my line of question, I didn't realize it's something very new.
you know, 25 years running manufacturing plants, I'm gonna knock on wood real hard. I've never had an OSHA inspection. So,
Yeah.
it's not
mean,
very common. I
usually
mean, we do
safety
try to address
inspection.
things, but ooh,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah, and what I didn't realize is that Con OSHA, which is the one that inspected us, subcontracts, OSHA subcontracts with Con OSHA to inspect municipal buildings and state buildings. But what was interesting is I asked them if they needed to get into the resident state trooper's office, because that was a separate key, which I don't have. And his comment was, no, the resident state trooper is a state, is considered, that room is considered an agency of the state, not the town. And if we inspected that, it would be some other time when we're doing, for instance, all the resident state troopers. So I thought that was interesting.
Eric,
Louise?
does that have any impact at all on the insurance of the buildings? Like liability insurance or anything like that?
I don't think so.
Probably not. It's probably driven more by claim history, although we got insurance people on thing.
Yeah.
About better, but
I mean, I
Right.
have been
My gut
through this,
would
but,
be,
Rob?
they wouldn't love it if they found out about it, but it's, fines aren't a covered loss. Like, you're assessed a fine for violations, not for an accident. So
Right.
an insurance company will probably not care too much, but I assume if there were egregious violations found that and an insurance company was really on the ball, anything they thought that would create a hazard, not great. But I don't know. I'm not on the underwriting side.
Right, and we certainly didn't have anything that falls in the category of a willful violation, which is certainly the most serious and carries with it. a
yeah,
much,
recurring.
So I worked for a company, actually, that got an OSHA inspection and got a willful violation. I wasn't there during the inspection. But unfortunately, what happened is we changed over the main electrical service in the building. And because of that, we had essentially a 48-inch clearance requirement in front of the main service panels. And I taped it off on the floor and I posted right on the panels, nothing goes in this spot, nothing within 42 inches. And the pressman had piled it full of paper. And OSHA walked in, and that was a willful violation. And that was a 32 grand fine that they were not able to bargain down. So we didn't have anything egregious, so.
And I just want to
Liz-
say too, real quick, Eric, when you get your report and you get up through all this and everything, let everybody know in the town who works with you what the violations were and what they can't do, so that they
Yep.
don't do this stuff and get us in trouble again.
No,
Yeah.
I've already done that with all
Yeah.
the employees based on the preliminary results and talked about what could and couldn't happen. Clutter has been one of my pet peeves for a while. And frankly, been kind of ignored. But they'll listen to OSHA, so that's good.
Yep.
Anyway, that's all I got for that. The Bunker Hill project is had about a 3-week hiccup because unfortunately the 4 utility companies, which is Frontier, Eversource, the cable company, and the fiber provider, the backbone provider, really delayed in switching out the service to the new poles on the new side. So it was mostly the fault of Frontier. And eventually I used Steve Weir, our legislator, as well as filing a direct claim with Pura to get them to actually comply, but it did delay things about 3 weeks. Shouldn't have any cost implications to the town. It's more an annoyance. What I want to let you know, and we'll talk about it later, kind of at the end of my report, I threw a little spreadsheet in there of what we paid them so far for that project. And I just want to keep you up to date on that. The Board of Selectmen finally, I am resubmitting a request for congressional funding that was not through the US Senate. It was not approved last year, even though it made it through the Senate Appropriations Commission, and it was a highly ranked project. So in an ordinary year, it would have been funded, but last year the Congress didn't approve any appropriations, and the government is moving under a continuous resolution, not a budget. So hopefully, collectively, they get their act together, and it will get funded this coming year. Unfortunately, they only gave me 7 days to resubmit, so I'm not real happy about that, because I got my butt to the wall trying to get all the contractors to requote, given that a year's gone by and copper prices have gone through the roof. So that's chewing up a bit of my time right now.
Liz, did you have a question? Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I was just muting because I hear little children crying in the background, so I'm good.
Got it. So the destratification fans that were going in the gym, those were finally installed last week when school was out of session. So that was money that was already budgeted in the building maintenance fund.
I do have a question
And-
about that. I do have a question about that. How are
Sure.
they? I had heard that they're wicked loud. Are people happy about them? Do you
I
know?
don't know.
Oh, you don't know?
I haven't
don't know where
really
I heard
talked to the school.
Okay. I didn't know if it
Wouldn't
was on the board of
surprise me.
selectmen meeting.
I mean, these are designed for a warehouse. So
Oh,
they're
okay.
not designed for a gymnasium.
Oh.
You know,
Hmm.
but you know, it also depends on, they have 9 levels, so it's not like you don't have to run them at max either. If you run them at max, I think they're going to be pretty loud.
Okay. I was just curious if you had experienced it at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was in there when we ran them all up to max.
Okay.
You know, I'm pretty deaf, so it didn't bother me. But maybe if you had
Me
a
too.
gym class in there and you were trying to give instruction, it would be a problem.
Okay.
So
Probably
I don't-
quieter than 40 8-year-olds, so.
Mhm.
Quieter than one 8-year-old. So the last thing is the Board of Selectmen approved expending up to $20,000 out of the building maintenance fund for the fire department cabinet and countertop upgrade. So yeah, that will be coming fairly soon. We also submitted a grant for the replacement for the senior transportation van. Generally, it takes about a year before we even know whether we got the grant or not. If
State
we
grant?
do it, yeah, it's kind of a state grant, but it's also passed through federal money. So it's anybody's guess right now. And the other thing I find very curious is that the state still on the books is saying that all state vehicles, and they want all municipal vehicles, including school buses, converted to electric. But the grant funding doesn't list an electric vehicle as an option. So it's like, on the one hand, they're telling us we're still supposed to be on track to do this. On another hand, you can't grant fund for it. So anyway, that's just a weirdness in town or state government. That would require a 20% match from the town. I did get the Board of Selectmen to authorize me to submit the grant, because I'm not authorized to submit any grant that requires a town match. Like I said, we will know sometime next spring if we get it, and probably we would get it in the next budget cycle, not, you know, so we would have to figure out where that 20% would come, and it would have to go to town meeting under the current charter rules to approve anyway. Not for me to apply for the grant, but for the town to actually accept it. So that's the thing on that. The other thing that threw me for a little bit of a loop is we had a meeting for the Long Hill Road Bridge replacement. So, you know, we had the initial public hearing, initial design meeting. The state's finally signed off on the 30% design phase. The designer for the bridge is Michael Baker International, which is a really good bridge designing firm. That's been done a couple months ago. They announced they would have permit plan sets by April 30 and a 70% design mid-May. And the DOT is now starting to push us to move the construction date up to the summer of 2026. And I think the reason they're doing that is because they're paranoid the federal government is going to cut the Fed local bridge program. And the sooner they get to, you know, final acceptance, even though the federal government has already agreed to fund the project, that doesn't mean they won't do like with so many other federal grants and just say, no, we were just kidding. We're not going to fund it. So why is that a problem? Well, that's a problem because next summer we were supposed to be going to construction on a state local bridge program that we delayed 1 year because the design wasn't through Army Corps of Engineers permitting. So there's no way we have the bandwidth to deal with one state local and one fed local bridge program at the same time. So one of them is going to have to get bumped. I also think it's highly unlikely that, given past history, that the federal local bridge will be ready to go to construction next summer. I mean, the stars and everything would have to align for that to do. So, but I don't want them both because in both those grants, we are responsible to pay the contractor and then get reimbursed. And when you've got a $3 million bridge and then a $350,000 construction management and instruction contract, at the same time you have a $2 million culvert project going, we don't have the cash to float both of those waiting for reimbursement. So one of those is going to have to go. I'm just letting you know because that's something I'm certainly quite concerned with that, we're going to get hit with. So that is that. I listed out on my report the various contractors that we've already identified, lined up contractors for the work to come into compliance. So most of the electrical upgrades are already done. The eyewash station, the contractor is just waiting. We were scheduled for install tomorrow, but the contractor, the company says it shipped it, but we actually don't have it yet. So until we get it, they're not going to schedule installation, but that should be pretty quick.
Is that
Chimney.
plumbed or something, Eric? It seems like a lot of money for an eyewash station.
Yeah, so the problem is that the smart way to do it is just hard plumb in an eyewash station for the building and be done with it. Because it's your lowest overall maintenance.
Yeah.
And you don't have to keep rebuying everything every year. And the standard now is you have to be able to supply it's like 1 liter of water per minute for 15 minutes. So you're talking about like a 5-gallon pressurized system now to meet the OSHA standard. So at that point, and then you got to replace the chemicals every year or every other year. And I just felt like it would be, in the long run, smarter to just hard plumb one and do it. So all the
I don't disagree with that. I just, that clarifies why the cost is there.
Yeah, it's a big chunk. And I was actually thinking that if we were going to do it, it would be smart to put in one of the shower eyewash combo units. But that gets stupidly expensive because a shower unit has to supply 20 gallons a minute for 30 minutes, 30 minutes continuously. And that's beyond any normal well pump to deliver. So now you got to buy the unit, you got to buy a new well pump, you got to repipe everything. So that was out. But buying the eyewash station makes sense.
Yeah, just for reference for the board, probably you guys are following along in the packet, but that's on page 4, the costs to mitigate these various things. So,
yep.
So $6,000 for an eyewash station seemed high. That's why I was questioning it.
Right. And it's come up multiple times where the town thought they got the money to hire the assistant for the community center. That money was available straight out of the line item to hire the community center director for a couple of reasons. One, we spent about $5,000 less on that person that would be budgeted. And 2, we didn't hire them at the beginning of the year. So we had 3 pay periods missing. And those 2 things combined with when we hired the assistant were enough that we had the money in that line item to pay the assistant and the which is part of the reason why the Board of Selectmen went along with it originally. The second thing was the consideration about fee in lieu of healthcare. I know that's really unpopular with some people on the Board of Selectmen. I can tell you that I was not the original proponent of that. That originally came from one Board of Selectmen member. But I've certainly used it to my advantage in hiring employees. And, you know, we have 6 less people on the town's health insurance than we did in 2021. So it has been very effective at getting people to not take health insurance and go on their spouses or whatever insurance. So overall, I think it's a good deal. Sure.
I didn't know, did we move on from your report onto? Because I know you have that under new business as well. Sorry, I don't have your report up.
Yeah, no, it's still in the report. He just addressed some of the questions that have been raised.
Oh,
in the
okay,
various
it's in
meetings,
both
so-
places.
So
Okay.
there's a fair amount of detail there. He's not
In
Right.
his
going
report.
through it all, but yeah.
So I'm not going through all of it. We also had questions about our current year's healthcare budget.
But
Um,
Eric, can I intervene? Just thank you. I just didn't know when we were gonna have this discussion before I mean, just to clarify with I appreciate you giving your side and your version of why you like the fee in lieu of health insurance. I mean, it's been widely talked about, in meetings that,
Sure.
just since we're discussing it here, that this isn't something that a lot of towns offer anymore. And I do appreciate, and I want to say this out loud, like, I know that people look at it differently. In my world, people either need health insurance or they don't. So I know in one part of your package, and I apologize if it's not here, you said that you use it in recruiting people or things of that nature. It's costing the taxpayers a lot of money. People that need health insurance will take it if they need it, and then they do have to pay 14% of the premium. So it's not something that's going to be abused or taken just simply to take it or not.
I
So,
would say, the one thing I would say, and I generally, I certainly sympathize with what you're saying, Joanna. I think in most cases, that's probably true. But in some cases, employers will offer 3 rates to an employee. 1 is a single person, 2 if you have 2 people, and 3 for a
100%.
family,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
And sometimes
I
it's
do
only
it,
2
so
rates.
yes, yeah.
And sometimes only 2 rates. It's one single person
Mhm.
and then a family. And
Mhm.
when that's the case, the cost between having a single person and a family, which could be anywhere from 2 to 12 people, is huge. So like there was a situation, for example, when my wife and I were, it was cheaper to be on just insure ourselves through our insurance. And so we did that versus, now they have a different company and they have a 2-person thing, so it makes more sense.
Right.
But there are some scenarios where somebody could weigh that and it would work in their favor to not take it and to have their spouse go to 2 people instead of, family. So
My point is, I agree, Mark. I think I love that the companies offer that 2-person thing now, because like you said, a family where let's just suppose it could be, say, just generalizations, 10,000 for a single person, all the way to 35,000 as a charge for a family policy, which can cover up to if you have 12 kids. Or, a 2-person thing, which is probably in the 20s or something like that. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
feel like it's always going to be an individual decision whether people need insurance or not. Kids stay on their family's policy until they're 26 generally. If families get along good and the parents don't mind keeping their kids on the policy. Again, it's just the reason it's brought up, and a lot of people feel the way that I do. Who knows who feels this way anymore? It's just it's costing the town a lot of money, you know, to pay people not to take insurance. So it'll come down to what the Board of Selectmen brings up, and, you know, we'll talk more on the health thing. I know Eric has more in the, you know, I have a couple points I want to make. I don't want to overtake his report. I think it's an individualized thing, whether people think, okay, we're keeping them from taking the policy. My point is I've never met a person, unless there's some strange situation that you either need it or not, because you're going to pay to take it too, is what I'm saying. You're gonna have to pay a percentage of the policy. It's not free. But if it ends up, the town ends up voting, you know, it'll be in the Board of Selectmen hands to talk about it. If they end up keeping it on, it just is a charge to the taxpayers for not taking insurance. But, all right, I have
Those
more
are
to
the
add later,
cheapest
but I'll wait,
employees
Eric,
the
till you
town
get to
has.
that. What?
Those are the cheapest employees the town has.
And
What kills the town are people with families. That's what kills the town on cost.
yeah, but
So
it
every
doesn't kill.
time,
We understand if you hire a great person that works and they happen to have a family, that's fine. Then that's what it is. I understand it's a big cost. I don't think you recruit based on whether someone has a family or not. It's kind of a roll of the dice. People either need insurance or don't, is what I'm saying. I'd rather it be a zero or we pay the insurance, whatever portion, rather than paying someone 6,600, especially part-time employee, you know, to not take insurance. But I did have one question that popped in, Eric. I had thought this, I get that the way the policy stands now, it's a one-time thing. That's the way I've seen it work. When you join your job the first time, you either sign up for, I know you can change getting insurance later. You either sign up for insurance or you take the fee in lieu of if you're not taking insurance. The way your report read to us, it sounds like people are jumping back and forth. So the fee in lieu of, I thought was a one-time opportunity. But you're saying if someone doesn't need insurance anymore, even though they've worked for the town for 5 years, they start getting the fee in lieu of later down the road?
yeah, and every time they do that, it saves the town $7,000.
I know you're looking
Win-win.
at it that way. I'm looking at it, it's costing the town.
Well, but think about this way. If you're at the age where you can go on Medicare, okay, let's take one example. There's a lot of downsides with Medicare. Like for me, given the number of prescriptions I have, Medicare would be a more costly approach than the town's insurance. Just simply when you look at how much I would end up paying for medication without going on Plan B, depending on what I was able to get that for. In my case, if there was no incentive and I was 65, I would absolutely stay on the town's insurance 100 days out of 100. There's 2 employees that both came to work for the town and elected Medicaid instead of the town's insurance because of the incentive. So both of those cases, that was a $7,000 savings. We had another employee in the last month just elected that was taking the health insurance and was able to finagle getting insured through another family member because it was cheaper for her to do that given the incentive. I mean, that to me is a win every day. That saves us money. So from my perspective, you know, we went from 20 people taking health care to the town to 14, you know, in exchange for an additional 4 people or 5 people that are getting fee in lieu of, with the same head count. And to me, that's a great thing. That's a
I
town.
respect your opinion, and I do. I like to listen to various sides. I never have a problem with someone that opposes what I think about, or people speaking their mind that they should speak their mind for themselves. But so thank you for that. I see it a whole different way. I just think it's costing the town money and I don't think it's a necessity, but I thank you for your version. You were gonna wrap up into, are we talking about the healthcare thing now, just to get it all out there?
Not for the next budget year. So Eric had a note here about the current budget year, the cost where they're tracking.
Well, you know
That-
that I've been all
That'll
over
be under new
this.
business, so,
And, okay, so I should
Right.
wait for the new business to.
yeah,
bring it-
yeah,
Okay,
I think for that.
thank you.
So you also brought up that you felt that we were way over last year. So what I did is I gave you a 1-year snapshot in the town for what we've spent to date on healthcare. At the 75% budget portion, and then what are all the contributing factors? Because right now we're about $17,000 underspent on healthcare. But when you look at the factors that involved multiple employees electing to take fee in lieu of, and every time you do that, that's a $7,000 savings to the town. As well as, so I listed out all of the things that have changed in that. And the reason I did that is because in any given year, it is easy to have a $30,000 to $40,000 swing, when you have as much turnover as we have, and not knowing necessarily what the status is of people you're hiring. So what I would say is that as far as last year's budget goes, what we budgeted appeared to be correct at the starting point of the year. A lot has changed. We're going to be under budget overall on that, no question, but not compared to what our starting assumptions. This year's a whole different story. We can talk about that. And I can tell you that we were definitely wrong, in what we had on there for this year.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. Again, I like to hear explanations. I'm just such a literal person. When we receive the spreadsheet that we're supposed to, look at and make sense of, and I understand the fluctuation of people changing, people dropping. Maybe this one needs single, maybe this one not, but it's scared, I didn't like the point. I was afraid this mistake had been happening for a lot of years. I understand there's going to be fluctuations, like you said, and most of the time there will be a surplus there. So I just wanted to make sure that whoever's crafting and putting the spreadsheet together, because we receive it, like I kind of said in an email today. We don't check it, put the formulas together, all of that. We do some of us do a lot of work with it in our, figuring things. I don't want to speak for anyone but myself ever again, but I do a lot of work with this as far as checking, recalculating. So I knew that night when I walked into the town meeting that we were overcharging at that point. Yes, will it fluctuate during the year, but we have to start somewhere. So
yeah, so I think we'll
but
take
he
that up
is
down in
addressing
new
me,
business.
Mark, and I've spent a lot of time on this waiting for the answer. So I do appreciate Eric addressing it tonight, because I've waited a couple weeks. I think the town meeting was a couple weeks ago, and that's okay. And Cheryl did respond today too with something, Eric, so I appreciate that. But that's all. But I understand it's going to fluctuate. It just made me nervous that when I found a mistake this year, that it probably had been going back several years. I'll move on from that. Thank you.
All right, next agenda item is the check register. I don't know if anybody's very short in the packet today. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that. Okay, well, hearing none, we'll go on to new business. So the first one is the next topic. We just segued into the new review of the healthcare costs.
Actually, we should have budget to actual.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's not listed in the yeah.
Yeah, review of budget.
Okay, I jumped it. Oh, they were flipped in the packet, so I thought maybe
Right.
it wasn't in there. Okay.
Okay.
So we're about 3/4 of the way through the year, as you pointed out, Eric. Any place we have all right, okay, my mistake. I was misreading what.
Sure. So I wanted to do a more thorough review now, because we normally do that, you know, when we're about 3/4 of the way through the budget. So we know kind of where we are overall. Presuming we have time to do that, I think that's certainly appropriate. Do you want me to share, or do you want me to just talk through kind of what the big things are that are going to be affecting it?
Well, if sharing is hard to read on these screens, so I don't know if it'll add that much value. But certainly I think if you could notate which specific lines you're talking about as we go through it, it might be helpful. That's my
Okay.
thought. If anybody wants to share the screen, we can do that too. This just starts on page 8 of your packet.
If there's a lot, I would appreciate it being shared. I'm more visual to see it, if we could. But if there's
Okay.
one or two that we're gonna mention, then I'm okay with not seeing it on the screen.
No, I got a whole bunch, so let me.
Yeah, I would appreciate, I'll go close, I'll shut my camera off and go close to the screen. Thank you.
Okay, so hang on a second. Share. Okay, so first up, let's talk about revenue overall, because that's one of that's essentially half the battle. So right now, the bottom line is, on paper, we're about $1.5 million short on revenue. But what I can tell you is that we're already, we know in April, end of April, beginning of May, we're going to get the last $1 million of ECS funding. So, $1 million of that is basically guaranteed by the state at this point. And if you look at the collections so far for April, we're up to around $570,000, which means, regardless of anything else, revenues are going to come in somewhat over expectations. And we're still going to get a lot of transfer station passes in, and we're coming into the busy part of the building season. So, our revenues from the building department are going to be up. So I can't give you a guesstimate at this point how far we're going to be over revenues, but we've already accounted for all the revenues that we expect. So we know we're going to be over for the year on revenues. Questions on that? You can see down in the bottom, says total income to this point, 11.2 million versus 12.7 million. If you go up, you'll see the ECS funding right here. That's $1 million worth of that. The rest is the fact that this is the last collection quarter for the tax collector. So we know we're going to be in good shape. Part of the reason is Kate has been much more proactive about collecting back taxes. So that's definitely boosting us. So we're going to be in good shape overall on revenue.
So
One of
we didn't have anything for supplemental motor vehicle taxes, but there's $250,000 to the positive there. Is that really zero budgeted?
Yes. So I'll tell you why. Because every year we budget that we will collect 100% of property tax in a given year. But we all know we don't. On average, we collect about 97%, but that varies from year to year. Almost always in an average year, that pretty closely balances out the supplemental. And a year out, you can't really guess what your supplemental is going to be, because there's too many things that go into it. The economy goes bad, people don't buy new cars. So most years those balance out, but the variability from year to year is like $70,000 or $80,000. So you have to be aware that that guess of the combined property tax plus supplemental tax is going to vary, solidly up or down $75,000. So that's always one of my scares in a budget going in, is not knowing exactly what I have for revenues. And we've talked about separating out and trying to estimate the supplemental, and not just motor vehicle, it's supplemental motor vehicle plus supplemental tax bills on personal property and supplemental on real estate. And we just haven't done it, because if you look at it over a long period of time, those two, the supplementals typically run to be around 3%, but it does vary. And there is a fair bit of variability both in how much we collect and what the supplemental is. So that's the reason why it's the way it is. I know that's probably unsatisfying for a lot of people. Kim?
Eric, could you just scroll down a little bit to the education section, please? I just want to make sure that what I'm seeing is correct. And could you just scroll over a little bit to, well, it's my right? Just want to make sure that I'm not missing any of the columns. I appreciate that. Just give me a second. I just want to take a look here.
So the left column is the current
Yeah.
amount, the center is the budget, and the right is
Okay.
the difference.
All right. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Can I ask how accurate these numbers are, these education numbers? I mean, those accurate? Like AES's Board of Ed, they've only spent $870,000 thus far.
So that to some extent is the lack of data transfer between the school and the town. Cheryl did get a whole big bunch of bank statements. So I suspect that the accuracy of that will be much closer next month. But
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
So the first one I want to talk about is the town clerk's office. Obviously, we are running at this point with just an assistant town clerk. So that 21,002 plus the 2,000, that will go unspent. So the bottom line is we're going to have about a $23,000 surplus in the town clerk's office. Just by virtue of the Board of Selectmen does not seem to want to appoint. They want to wait for the next election cycle and let that person be voted on, as opposed to appointing them now and then having them go to the end of what would have been Carol's term. So I'm suspecting we're going to have a $23,000 surplus there. So next.
Eric, can I ask a question on that? I don't
You
know if
certainly
it's
can.
if it's appropriate. I don't want to ask anything personal, but I know that we're retaining our former town clerk for training and everything. Wouldn't that line be used to pay that person? So we might not have a surplus there? I have no idea what the contract is or what you've done, but would that line be
So-
the one where the funds are being expended from?
We do not have a contract.
Oh, okay.
I proposed a contract to the Board of Selectmen,
Mhm.
or gave them what I thought was appropriate. Does not appear, from what I can tell, that they have any interest in signing a contract. Therefore, that will go unexpended. So I
Oh, no,
believe,
thank you. I didn't know
Yeah.
if, you know, I've been to the Board of Selectmen meetings where they've talked about it, so we have no knowledge of anything having happened, but I thought maybe some funds would be coming from that line. Okay,
correct.
thank you
So
for
I
the
don't believe
update.
they will, but
Okay,
who knows? Maybe they sign a contract and back pay in June. I mean, that's on them. Because
Yeah.
that is not because I have no responsibility for that office, although I gave them a proposal, they may accept it or not. That's on them. The next one I want to talk about a little bit really is elections. If you go down to the elections line, you can see where we still have a pretty good surplus in elections, kind of all the way through. Part of that is the fact that the state did, after saying they wouldn't last year, did have supplemental funding for early elections. And the second is the registrars, are still working through what they really need for staffing levels and all of that. So we're going to have, at least 12,000 back in that line item. So that's going to account for a fairly good chunk. The next one down.
Eric, on the elections, is that a running total, or is that the total for the year? I mean, we still have an election coming up, so just curious. Like the 22,000 budget for election salaries, is that the amount for the year, or is that a three? I just wonder how it's accrued in the budget. Do you know?
Election salaries, no, it's budgeted once. That's what's been expended on election salaries.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we still have a surplus, clearly. I was just curious. Okay.
Yeah, we have a pretty good surplus. That's why I said 12,000, because we're going to spend at least 1,000 on the referendum, but that doesn't have early voting implications. Now, if we go to 6 referendums like we had in the past, we could chew up a bunch of that money. But failing that, we're going to have a pretty good surplus. Building department, we're going to be overspent by somewhere around $12,000 that we're going to need to make up. And that is because we ended up hiring a zoning agent that had 0 experience. So with the Board of Selectmen's permission, I established a pretty long overlap between the 2 individuals. So we had about 4 months where we were paying them both at the same time as one was training the other as they assumed the responsibilities. And frankly, there's a huge shortage of, zoning agents. So I think that's, that's an unfortunate reality. The good news is that we conditioned the pay on the new employee on getting certified and fully trained. And since that's a multi-year process, we're going to see lower costs in the future up until the point where he gets fully trained and Casio certified. So we'll have a period of lower expenses, but right now in this budget, that one's definitely going to be over. We're not over yet, but we have a whole quarter to go through, and we've already blown through that whole budget. So I'm giving you a heads up that that's going to happen. Civil preparedness. I am going to recommend to the Planning and Zoning Commission that we give the EMC, or Emergency Management Communication person for the town, who also heads the Town of Andover's CERT, which is Civilian Emergency Response Team, a one-time bonus. And the reason is that she is the primary person that had to produce the update to, the every 4-year update to the town's emergency management plan overall, which was a lot of work on her part. And because she did that and we got it certified, we were able to get a grant for $5,000. So I would like to take a portion of that grant and give her a bonus for getting it in on time, and then applying for the grant because she got it in on time. So she did all the work, she should get some benefit out of it. But that's still got to go through the Board of Selectmen. Don't know whether they'll agree with it or not. We're certainly going to be fine on that line item overall. Community center, we're going to be okay, even with the assistant, which was not an originally budgeted item. You can see the assistant has up to this point spent $4,400, but combining those two, we're still going to be under. So not a lot to worry about there, at least as far as I am concerned. On town expenses overall, we're closer than I would like. We did get a lot more website fees than we anticipated. That's one of the things we're quite a bit over. Not a huge deal. But part of the issue is that the company we use, Civic Plus, and our communication platform, which is Civic Ready, I mean, you can't ask them this year what the contract is going to be for next year. And they don't run on a town's fiscal cycle. They run on a January to January cycle. So we got hit with a fairly large increase there. That put us way over what we anticipated. Also, if you see the line for propane was overexpended, there was two reasons for that. The first is that because we put in 2 brand new tanks, we started the year with 0 propane in there, and we'll finish the year with fairly full tanks. So even though we've overspent $2,000, we've still got, probably $3,000 worth of propane sitting in the tank that we didn't have at the beginning of this budget cycle. The other thing is, since we are playing off electrical usage versus propane usage in the winter, because the town hall now has dual heating sources. We can heat completely with propane or completely with electricity. I want one full budget cycle and then to be able to look at all our usage and compare it to heating degree days, figure out where we are, and then make recommendations for next year how we balance electrical usage versus propane usage. Just not there yet. Advertising, as you well know, we had a Board of Selectmen position open for 6 or 7 months. That was an awful lot of extra adverts in the River East. We use River East primarily because they are the cheapest spot we can post official notices on legally, because they do have a town-wide circulation. Insurance overall, we're okay at the moment. It's going to depend to some extent on, I think we're going to stay okay. What I don't know yet is when we're actually getting the fire truck. And as soon as we get the fire truck, we're about to add $1 million to our ESIP policy, which will boost that. So presuming that doesn't hit before the end of the year, we're going to be fine on insurance. Employee benefits. If you look at everything together, Social Security and Med.
Eric, can you scroll down so we can follow?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. If you look at employee benefits in total, we're going to be okay. We're definitely going to be under on health and dental, but that was simply because of personnel changes. We're going to be over a little bit on Social Security and Med, but not a lot. And on MRF, we're going to be okay. So we haven't paid our admin fees yet. We haven't paid our amortization fees yet. So those things are going to be coming in. Overall, we look like we're going to be okay on employee benefits overall by somewhere around 15K, but all of that is going to be in the health and dental insurance. We should be pretty close to being on the other items. Town garage overall, we look okay. I'm not seeing any real issues with that. Our expenditures pretty well in line with where we are in the budget series. I know we've been looking at a bunch of building maintenance tasks that we would like to do. Presuming we're not going to go over on the other, we'll schedule that for the last quarter of this year. We usually try not to spend much out of building maintenance, just in case we have any oopses during the year in the building. I don't necessarily think we're going to do it at all. One of the things we're starting to pick away at is it's a 150-year-old building. We're having a lot of problems with some of the doors, and we're also having a lot of problems with bricks falling. But that's a CIP conversation, because the fix to that building is a couple $100,000. And we have a leaky roof in the cold storage area, both our cold storage areas, which is we're going to have to address at some point, but that's not happening in this budget. Let me scroll down. The old firehouse is, where is that? Old firehouse is going to be definitely over budget. That is just the service fees for three-phase power, which we have to maintain until we tear that building down. I had anticipated we'd have already torn it down this year, but we just haven't gotten to that. So that we're going to be over. The next big one we're going to be over quite a bit is the town engineer line. But part of that is we're going to end up cleaning up. A lot of those fees are related to the construction of the athletic fields. And we should be able to use most of that as the town's contribution towards the project, the pickleball and playground, and the what's called the phase 2 improvements at the rec field. So we should be able to use that money we're spending as in the town engineer as part of the town's contribution, which means we will not have to spend that money out of the multi-use building fund. So we are over, but ultimately, the town is on the hook for 20% of the cost of the STEEP grant project. This counts towards those costs. So in the end, that will, we're definitely over, but we're over for a specific reason. And we should be able to not spend that same amount of money out of the multi-use building fund by spending it here. And we'll be able to cover it from somewhere else in the budget. None of those are too significant. Public Works overall looks like it's okay. It looks like, unless we get another snowstorm, which I hope not, that we're going to be okay on Public Works labor for snow removal. We are going to be pretty much fully expent on the both sand and salt for this year. I know it doesn't show it this year, but we just had to, we've blown through our entire supply, and we're doing what we do in a normal year, which is pre-pack the shed. So at the beginning of the year, we have a fair amount to work with. So we did use more salt this year than we have in years past. And we did use more sand than kind of we were anticipating. But overall, Public Works is okay. I'm pretty sure that budget overall will come out fairly well, even. We are going to be in the transfer station, definitely under on tipping fees. And if you notice from this year's budget, we've reduced that to account. This is really our first full year on the new contract. And so it's somewhat unclear what, until we got into it, it was pretty hard to predict. And frankly, the amount of polls we get per year is a fairly variable number. So it's not like we have the same amount of trash every year. That's variable within 5 or 10%. So there's always a fair bit of uncertainty in that number. The one thing that I'll bring your attention to, which has been one of my real bugaboos, is what's called the energy and environmental fee. This is kind of a slush fee that Casella builds into all their contracts. And it essentially accounts for the cost of fuel, and it accounts for all the things that affect their business profitability. And it's really annoying because there's no good way to figure out in advance what that fee is going to be. And it's really hard to even get a straight answer on what it contains. I've read through the corporate literature, but it's quite vague. But there's also doesn't seem to be any way we can get out of dealing with it. The other thing we're going to be a fair bit over is the compactor lease. As you remember, we talked about it. Casella some point this year figured out that, hey, they actually have 2 that are being leased, not 1. And so they started charging us for both of their compactors, not just 1. I've known that for the last 5 years that they've been undercharging me, but I wasn't going to tell them. But now they've found out, so now we're paying. Overall, we should be okay in Public Works. Recycling, we're in good shape overall. We're going to have some expenses due to Mid-Nerock that we haven't gotten yet, because their expenses, their hazardous waste collection is like a late summer and fall thing, and then it starts up again in April. So we're going to have some extra, budgets to that, but overall we're in pretty good shape. Not a huge number, but it's good that we're under. Ground care, we're quite a bit under right now. But frankly, we haven't gotten a bill from Hebron. They're kind of famous for giving us one big bill very late in the year. So I think we're going to be safely under, but, there's a lot of billing and a lot of work that's gone into this that we haven't been billed for yet. So don't know exactly where that's going to come out. The custodian, we're going to be well under. Last year we budgeted when Willie took over the responsibility for cleaning the community center. And we really had no idea how many hours a week that was going to take. He's been pretty efficient for that. So we just haven't been spending that money. So we're going to have a pretty good chunk back in the custodian budget. I'm guessing we're going to be around 5,000 under for the year on that one. So pretty much everything else is okay until we go down to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And this is where I'll find it. Hang on. Planning and Zoning Commission. So we are way the heck over on legal fees. The reason why I wasn't bringing this to your attention before is it looked like we were going to have a final settlement in this fiscal year. And so the bottom line is the town is suing a person over the gravel pit operation on Route 6. So they're definitely in violation. We will definitely get our legal fees back out of this. So ultimately, this is going to go away. And I was pretty sure it was going to go away in this budget year because it looked like they had a buyer for the property and they would have had to settle with that before they sold. But it looks like the buyer for that portion just in the last week or so is maybe not going through. So it may be past this fiscal year when we actually settle. So we're going to get that money back, but we may not get that money back in this fiscal year. So we're obviously, almost $15,000 over budget on that, which is why I'm bringing it to your attention. So I guess what I would say is, overall, when you take away all the things we're over and all the things we're under, we're going to be under budget on expense. There's going to be a few things that we're quite a bit over, and I kind of explained why. And there's a bunch of things that are going to be quite a bit under. And I kind of explained why those particular items are under. Any questions to this point? So, I mean, the takeaway really is that we're going to be over on revenue. I can't tell you how much at this point. And unless something really bad happens and we really get whacked by OSHA, you know, we're going to bring the town budget overall under. So we look like we're in pretty good shape. And I'm more than happy to take any questions on this. I know it's a lot to throw at you.
It was helpful. I think it's a good overview. Questions for Eric? Any of these line items?
No, thank you for the information, Eric.
Thank
Sure.
you, Eric. Excellent explanation of all those things. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
and it is timely. It's a good time to have it, so I appreciate that. We did it.
Thank you,
Eric,
Eric.
I just had a question. Yeah, thank you as well from me. We will have a session probably with Cheryl, you know, the overages versus, you know, we'll have a session, one of our meetings with the transfers, I imagine, after the fiscal year ends or whatever, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
Before, because we have to approve them before the
Right.
year ends.
Right,
yeah, and
I do
and
know, yeah.
per the auditor, in years past, we have made up the department by department line items and evened all of them out. And the auditor basically last year said, you know, you're kind of crazy to do that. All you really have to do is level, you know, you've got to be even at the department level. So that's what we did last year, which means there's a lot less corrections we have. And the ones I gave you are basically the ones that are going to be the corrections unless something else
Okay.
happens that are catastrophic.
That's what I thought. Yep, thank you.
I've got a question. Is there any wiggle room at all between like the under and the over? Can you take something from the under and bring it to the over in another line item?
Well, that's
Yeah,
what we
that-
do with the transfers.
Right.
Within a budget, we generally just can make the change, right? But otherwise, we have to approve the transfers for the end of the year.
But we can.
You remember, kind of, we got away from doing that on the fly. We kind of set a
Yeah.
policy where major transfers, we would end up, you know, reconciling in a batch mode, basically.
But can you do that with things that are really not kind of the same?
Yeah, we can. I mean, it's either, if you're under budget, you got to move some money in from a fund to pay for it in some way, some either contingency fund or some other fund. And if you're over, you're going to be moving it into a fund, so it's kind of a wash.
Okay.
And it's a good question, but yeah, that's how that would generally work. Other questions for Eric?
All right, then I will stop sharing.
Okay, all right, then the real check register is actually following this, so there's the normal list of, yeah, it makes more sense.
Yep.
I don't know if anybody has any questions on the check register? The Mahoney Sable hit. Okay, well, nobody has any questions. We can move on to 6A, which is new business. And this is the review of the healthcare costs. So we already talked about this a little bit, and Cheryl did send an email responding to Joanne's query. You know, I just skimmed over it. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read it. I'm still kind of catching up from being away, but it does indicate, as Joanne had strongly suggested, that there was an error in the spreadsheet. So we did over budget by the amount. Of course, as we know, things can change because of personnel shifts or whatever. But Eric, do you have anything more to add?
Nope, today was the first time Cheryl myself and Chris have sat in a room for since you went to Florida a long time ago. So that was kind of today's major topic, was to review that. And I also think that at some point, you know, and so I asked, you know, it's been an ask of mine for a while that we sit down and review it. And I do agree with Joanne, but I'm not going to say that's over unless I get an official opinion from the treasurer. And so that's why you got the response from her, not me.
Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
follow-up if I could.
Yep, go ahead, Joanne.
So I know in our process, in our budget process, one part we had noticed, and I do appreciate Cheryl getting back, you know, and I know everybody's main concern was we can't change it, we can't change it. And I get that because we had already moved it along. I tried my best to, you know, get it taken care of in the town meeting. And I understand that it couldn't, you know, people weren't just going to go solely on my thought, you know, even though I was pretty sure. But during our process, Eric, and this is just so that it doesn't happen again, we knew that supposedly the part that was budgeted was an 8% amount. And at one point, we had already asked that it get changed to the 7%, not 7 o'clock, 7% amount. So whatever that will be, that will be. I know that the whole thing, everybody's trying to tell us is, hey, we can't change it. I get that. I just want to make sure going forward, and that's all I reiterate in things is, you know, not playing a blame game, whatever, just whatever, there was a mistake. We want to make sure that whatever we're handed in the future is just correct. So now I have this feeling of worry in my mind that there could be other mistakes in other places. That was just such a big figure that I was able to just try to compute it real quick, you know? So,
Yeah, I have a thought on that. So I think it might make sense to convene, and maybe this is the wrong word, but a committee, maybe a group of 2 or 3 people to sit there and just go through page by page, formula by formula. Anything that should be a formula should be a locked cell. It's a nuisance doing all that, but you can. And then, you know, that way we protect, you know, protect the integrity of the data and the formulas a little better.
and Mark, that's my whole thing. And I appreciate what you're saying because I'm on the same wavelength. Like I tried it, we're volunteers, we're elected, we're appointed, you know, we're taking it in, but we did not put this spreadsheet together. So we can't know every single little ins and out of it. So
Right.
yeah,
So,
I'm
and even
thinking
if it was
before.
perfect at one time, it got overwritten. And you guys saw me change numbers on the fly during the meetings,
Oh,
trying to keep track. So you
right.
got to be very careful. Yeah.
And now that
Right,
we're
and-
here, we would hope, you know, whoever's going to be responsible for putting the data in the first spreadsheet, or, you know, we can convene before this happens. I mean, we were in a definitely changed, rushed year. And this is what came of it. You know, I'm personally glad we found mistakes, and if we did, we're going to bring them up and we can see what happens in the future. And just to, since we're on this topic of this thing, I believe every year, Eric, the thought is to put the actuals in there. I understand that it's going to vary. It could change, you know, someone could leave, someone could not need health insurance. And I get all of that. To me, I'm such a, again, I always go back to the literal. I just wanted to know there was a mistake. I feel like there was a lot of, you know, fluffing on the side. Oh, and it was, it's all okay. We're all here.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
we understand there's going to be overages and underages, or under, whatever the word is, but just want to make sure in the future that we're basing that on what we have actual employees at the time, because we're funding a line.
It's your best guess. that
So
way.
moving forward, trying to come up with a plan that something that like this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, you're, you know, no question. And I will tell you that every budget since I've been here has had errors in it. I don't think there's any question. You know, and there's errors a bunch of different ways. You know, I mean, I can tell you that based on what was released today by the consensus state appropriations group, probably we will get our ECS funding back. When I talked to legislators a couple weeks ago, they were like, no, the governor's adamant we're moving towards the revised ECS and he's not going to accept that. Now, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I mean, if I were making that guess today, I would probably gamble that that money got put back in there. Next year will be much easier because it's a biennial budget. But last year, we got $79,000 in revenue from the state we weren't anticipating because the state surplus was higher than it was, and a certain fraction of that comes back to the state. Well, 80 grand's an awful lot of money. That's not something we budgeted for.
But I think we can all agree that there's a difference in kind between something that changes due to external factors and just making sure that the spreadsheet is correct,
Sure.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any other comments or questions on that?
No, thank you for the in-depth discussion and for Cheryl and everybody addressing it. Yeah. And we'll have a plan moving forward.
Yep.
Okay, I guess we can move on to 6B, which is legislative updates. Eric, you did send some stuff out the last hour this afternoon.
Yeah, I apologize for
Summary
popping that
that
out
was
so
helpful.
late,
Yeah.
but they just put it out this afternoon. I did
Yeah.
skim through all 250 pages of documentation. I don't expect you to, because I knew the things that I was concerned with. So of the things I was concerned with, it does look like they reversed the governor's recommendation to zero out all the early election support and funding. So potentially we'll have $5,000 more, $5,000 to $7,000 more state revenue to go towards early voting than we were anticipating. Because up to this point, we haven't seen any indication that anybody was considering it. But the Appropriations Commission appears to have restored that funding. The Appropriations Commission at least has held the town harmless on the ECS funding. So that's plus $89,000 to the town. They agreed with the governor on the pilot, the payment in lieu of, so that should stay the same as our estimates. The negative is that the legislature has been actively considering a change to the state local bridge program. Myself and a bunch of the other small town administrators have been lobbying very hard for them to increase the state share of that fund to 75% and increase the amount of the annual bond, because that's paid for through bond funding that they bond fund. Because as most of you know, our biggest liabilities in terms of infrastructure are failing culverts. And if we got bit hard by a storm, I could easily see us with a $10+ million emergency appropriation to fix all that. So it really is that serious. But given our budget constraints, we're budgeting for it as fast as we can. If we could get the state to up their contribution to 75% or even 66%, that would increase the rate at which we could address our problems. But they don't appear to do it, and they do not. There was a pretty bipartisan push to increase funds for the state rail trail. As you know, our public works spends not a lot of money, but definitely labor on maintaining the trail, because the state DEP flat out does not have the money or the manpower to do it. I was hoping that would change with this budget cycle, but that doesn't appear to it. So that's pretty much all I have on the legislative update. There's still some things I'm hoping come out of the legislature, and I'm hoping we don't get stuck with too many more unfunded mandates, because there are about 60 or 70 things that have time or cost implications to towns that are still actively up for bills in the legislature. So That's all I got for that.
Yeah,
Eric,
can I ask you a
Oh.
question? Oh.
Sure.
I heard you talking at the Board of Selectmen meeting about the state replacing our signs, like speed signs and stuff. Did that already start?
Not the speed signs project. What you're seeing is something which I've been getting a lot of flack for the last couple days is the state has been installing new curvature warning signs.
Yes, right near my house on Lake
A bunch
Road.
of them seem to be really bizarre. We signed up for that program in like 2019, and it took the state 6 years to pull the trigger on it. I had totally forgot about it, until we got a notification earlier this year that, yeah, it's probably going to happen this year. And then they just came and started putting signs in. So yeah, gotten a bunch of complaints about them. The public works
Really?
foreman and I have talked about it, and we're going to start. There's some of them that we can move to areas that are less obnoxious, so they're not right in the faces of the homeowners who have them in their front yards.
yeah. I was just gonna say, I'm not sure so much as I heard from a couple people today about one put on Bear Swamp.
I
and
know that's
but
retarded.
It doesn't
Yeah.
bother me, but I think the person that talked to me said, "Are we really paying for these new signs? What is that sign for?" And I didn't know that that was one of the signs that fell into the state program. I said, "Geez, I'll ask Eric about it." So it's nice to know that we didn't pay for that sign.
Yeah,
That's
no,
what-
we didn't pay. It's not our labor, but it's probably going to be our labor moving them, at least some of them. What they were supposed to have put up on the sharp curves is the horizontal chevrons indicating that you're going around a curve and you have to pay attention before you drive off the road and kill yourself. Some of the signage they put up seemed just really bizarre to me. Yeah. Yep.
Eric, so very selfishly, I was wondering if I could go back to the conversation, and I say selfishly because I live on Bear Swamp Road and I live on the other side of what has been identified as a failing culvert.
Sure.
And if you said, like you said, if we had a really bad storm, this road could be washed out and there's no way out the other end of Bear Swamp. It's a dead end. And so, I mean, what would happen?
You'd always be able to walk. You could borrow one of the town's e-bikes. I'm sure it would be fine.
But I just want to, I mean, is there any way that the state, would look at something like that and say, this is a dead end road. It's a culvert that's been identified as failing. And, if you had a storm, we could be stranded up here on Bear Swamp Road.
So here's the basic problem is that the last funding cycle, when we got approved and we got one culvert through the appropriation for a 50% reimbursement, you can't submit one unless it's rated less. Culverts are rated on a scale of basically 1 to 9. It's got to be a 3 or lower to really even be eligible to come up on the program. Yours is a 2. So it's definitely eligible, but only about one culvert in 3 that applies for the funding actually gets the funding in any given year, because there just is not enough funding to go around. We were very lucky to get funded, and that is one of the reasons why we hired Nathan Jacobson as our town engineer, is because they have a really good success rate of getting culverts through the local bridge program. So yeah, it's a concern. You're certainly not the only person in that, and there's a potential. I mean, there's definitely a potential in a catastrophic rainstorm that we could suffer a lot of damage. But I can only fund it at the rate where we're putting money into the bridge and culvert fund and things that I can get applied. So that's, yeah, I recognize it's a vulnerability. We've got a number of them, and a number that are safety concerns. I mean, our town engineer 5 years ago told us we probably should consider not driving over Lake Road at Basola. That was his recommendation. It's in the program, but that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Mark, can I go ahead with a question?
Go ahead,
It's
Jen.
not on the culverts. Just quick question, Eric. By chance, if the budget does fail at referendum, I know we're not able to make any of these corrections, like adding in the ECS funding or anything, because everything's set in stone. But if it does fail, we're allowed to add those back in, correct? I mean, any
So
changes?
if the budget fails, you
Mhm,
basically get a fresh start.
right,
You can adjust anything in any line item. The budget automatically gets bifurcated and goes to both the budget meeting and the referendum as a bifurcated budget. Basically what happens is I'm going to recommend to you as a board that you schedule a special meeting for the day after the referendum, because the referendum is on May 6th. May 7th would be a Wednesday. You schedule a Wednesday special meeting. If you don't need it and the referendum passes, you're free. If you don't, then you have to get a budget back to the public, essentially ASAP. So because the following Tuesday, so 6 days later would be the next budget meeting, and then that would be followed 2 weeks later by the referendum if it passes the budget meeting.
okay.
So, but yes, if it fails, you can very definitely, if it fails, you're gonna end up having to cut line items, because it only fails because people are unhappy that spending is too high, and your only solution to that is cutting. Certainly in previous times when boards of finance tried to brazen it out and put the same budget back to the public, it was not well received.
Well, I would argue that in this case, the challenge might be the school budget and the intention. We have a new charter, so people are unhappy with the school budget. Town budget might hold on its own.
Right.
Clearly, we
And
had a
that-
large increase, and there's some concern about that. So,
Yep, and that's a decision with the Board of Finance where you go with it. Yep.
No, thank you for the answer to my question. Yeah. Okay.
okay. Any other questions about the legislative actions? Okay, well, I guess then the next one we have is the impact of the OSHA inspection. Do you have anything to add? We haven't already talked about?
No, I think I beat that to death already. Just to
Okay.
tell you that that's gonna whack the building maintenance fund for around 26 grand. And we're gonna take some money out of the contingency to cover.
Do we know if those we'll know the amount of the fines and the real cost of remediation before the end of this budget year?
Yeah. Apparently,
You kind of
usually,
implied that, but I don't know if we really stated it.
right. As far as I understand it, it's a quick, because you're only, unless there's some real serious reason why it has to take more than 30 days, your final correction plan has to be in and submitted and adjudicated 30 days essentially after you have the meeting with them.
Okay.
So within 45 days, we should have a final resolution of that, as I understand it.
Further questions from Eric on the OSHA?
Yeah, actually, going back to the the referendum, will the referendum be passing both budgets at the same time, or is that actually going to be separated now for the first time?
It is not separated per the charter. It's only bifurcated if it fails once.
Okay,
So once it fails, it gets bifurcated. There will be two votes, though. There will be a vote on the RAM budget, and there will be a vote on the town overall budget. But if the town budget passes and the RAM budget passes, you still don't have an opportunity to set the mill rate. Because although we put the RAM budget in our budget as a placeholder, it's just like any revenue source or expense source that you can't control. Because
You're
that
saying
is
if the
voted
RAM
by-
budget does not pass?
Correct.
Okay, it
Right.
sounded like you said if they both pass, I was a little confused.
Oh, if they both pass, you're home free.
Yeah,
um,
okay.
You know,
Yeah.
and then the only
District.
thing you have to do is we have to talk about when you want to set the mill rate. Because it might be, you know, you might be able to hold off setting the mill rate until we know one way or the other what the revenues are going to be. You can't push it off too long because then you back up the tax collector's office. But you may be able to wait long enough to do that so that you can account for the $89,000 if we're gonna get that back.
Can you
Rob?
just remind me real quick, when the RAM referendum vote is?
May sixth, same as the
Same,
town.
same day, okay.
Yeah.
Same day, yeah.
That's why we
So-
sped up the
That
whole
was
process.
intentional,
We could do it
yeah.
So
all-
that's why we need that May 7th special meeting set.
Correct, correct. Unless, of course, you're positive it's gonna pass at referendum, but
You
Always
know,
cancel a meeting.
but yeah, exactly. Why don't do we need a motion on that, Mark? Or just, do you want me to move and,
Well, I mean, we're kind of out of our, let's wait till we get the board open discussion, I would say. just
Okay.
So we follow the agenda.
yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Any other questions on the OSHA impact or legislative stuff? Okay, well, I'll move on to the next item in the agenda, which is the approval of the meeting minutes. So before we start on that, if anybody wants to make motions to approve these minutes, there's an error. The first item there, 7A, says tri-board meeting minutes, but the meeting minutes that are included are actually the December regular meeting.
Yeah.
So that one is probably off the table for tonight. So December 18th regular meeting minutes instead of the tri-board meeting minutes. So that we'll still have to revisit the tri-board meeting minutes at another time. However, the others are there. If anybody wants to make a motion to approve any of the meeting minutes there, 7A, 7B, et cetera. I don't know if everybody sees these, but the 7B is the January 22 regular meeting. Anybody want to make a motion to approve those minutes?
Mark, are we
I
gonna
had
do the? Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I had a couple notes on, well, so on a couple of the meetings, I had a couple notes that I had written down. Which one, so December 18th was actually not, let's see, there was a December 4th meeting and there was a December 18th meeting. Which one did you say was incorrect?
Well, it's just the agenda was wrong. So the agenda says the list December 4th tri-board meeting as the agenda item. It does not list the Wednesday, December 18th meeting. And technically, we shouldn't take action on anything that's not on the agenda.
On this, okay, gotcha. Okay.
So in my
we-
view, we should probably postpone discussion of the December meetings.
Okay, so we'd
It's a
start with
regular
January
meeting.
22nd.
you could just add it to the agenda.
Well, yeah, we could, or just do it in board open discussion, I guess. But, yeah. I mean, we're kind of late to, we
Yeah.
have not.
We can't just vote to change it and correct it right now and to
Well,
make
we
the
don't
corrections
have-
as noted.
Okay, hold on a second. So at the January meeting, we already approved the December 18th regular meeting minutes, so we do not need to take action on that. What we do not have in our packet is the tri-board meeting minutes. Now,
Got
we've had them in front of us several times. If
were
somebody wants
last
to make a
month's.
motion to approve it, we could. I wasn't there, so I won't vote. I'll
So-
abstain.
So the tri-board meeting minutes was in last month's packet.
And the month
And I-
before that, and the month before.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
did read it. I did read it, and there was a couple of things in it that need
You think maybe
addressing.
clarification or change? Okay. I
Yeah,
would say then
so,
we let that go, and then you probably want to make a note of those.
yeah, I have them noted. Would it be best just to send it in an email or
That's
should
what
it
I
be-
would suggest. Send it to the email and copy the whole board, and then we can look at it, and anybody who, if everyone's in agreement, we can make it's an administrative thing, so we're not voting on it or taking action outside of a public meeting. It's not an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again,
just
I
hate
wasn't
to-
there, but so I wouldn't know either way, but I think it would make sense to have everybody to have the paper in front of them, the minutes plus your suggested edits.
Yeah,
And I'm not trying to be flippant, but it was a tri-board meeting. Only one board technically has to approve.
approve it. Oh,
So
So has
I
anyone
thought
approved
the
it?
Board of Selectmen had already approved the tri-board meeting minutes.
oh, they did?
It doesn't mean you can't. I thought they did. I could be wrong. I mean,
Well-
there's so many minutes that go through my,
Hmm.
my eyes that,
I think it would still behoove the Board of Finance to take a close look at make sure the meeting minutes and we agree with them.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying if you
Mhm.
decided to punt on that and never do it, it probably wouldn't be a foul. you
Yeah.
know?
Got it. So I think the gist of it is that we probably want to see Liz's notes and anybody else who has any comments on that tri-board meeting minutes in front of us. And then those of you that were there can, hopefully we kind of agree that in any changes that we want to make, and then we can go from there. But I think we should probably postpone that till next meeting, and if we get a chance to review it.
Are there any minutes that we can approve tonight?
I
or-
know. Are we
Yeah, well, I
moving
would say
along to just
January,
like,
January 22nd, the meeting minutes are there. I took a quick skim, but I didn't see any issues there. Liz, you
Yeah,
raised
I
your
do
hand.
the same.
Yeah, so on number 5, old business, on C, second paragraph, my notes, discussed including 2% non-lapsing account for AES and AES Capital Fund in the STIF account. Board of Education can also move funds to these accounts into a money market account to also earn interest. Okay, what was my note? Oh, should this say the Board of Ed would like to move funds to a money market?
Now, I think that was something we suggested that they could consider doing, if I remember correctly. They wanted to put it in the STIF account, and we said we weren't sure they'd be able to do it. But they had other options, maybe. They didn't get Bill might have
Right.
suggested. I can't really remember off the top of my head, but.
Right, but the sentence says Board of Education can also move funds for these 2 accounts into a money market account. And I'm wondering if it would be more appropriate to say the Board of Ed would like to move funds. Because it hasn't been determined that they can actually do that, right? So I think it was more like they would like to.
Yeah.
The
well,
sentence says,
I feel like that
I'm-
was on my, I'd have to look back at the minutes and I don't have them open, but I think I reported on it and I thought that I was quoting something from Cheryl.
Oh, could
Not-
be.
not that-
Maybe we could wait on that one and do a little digging and find out then.
Yeah, I can find the passage from Cheryl. I thought that we reported on the STIF account that Cheryl didn't feel comfortable opening another STIF account on the town.
I think we
side.
can't, yeah.
Yeah, and
right,
I don't see it in front of me, but from my memory, from what Liz is referencing, it could have been, it probably is documented wrong in the minutes. But
yeah, my point is, I think it should say that the Board of Ed would like to be able to move funds to a money market or whatever. Here it says Board of Education can also move funds.
Okay, so maybe we should postpone action on those
Yeah.
minutes.
mhm, postpone those, yeah.
All right, and then people can review them and I don't know if it's really a substantive change, but it's better to get it accurate.
Thanks for looking
Um,
at that, Liz.
I also reviewed February 12th and February 19th, and I didn't see anything odd
Clearly, you're reading this a lot closer than I am, so I feel confident.
So do you want to make a motion, Liz, that we approve the February
Sure.
minutes?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve February 12th and February 19th joint Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, do we have any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the meeting minutes for February 12th and February 19th are approved. The next one would be February 26th, regular meeting. Anybody have any
And I-
concerns of those or?
I did read through the minutes tonight too, just overview, not, line by line. I thought that most of them looked pretty good. I know we've had them on for a couple sessions. So I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the February 26th meeting minutes.
Okay, do we have a
Second.
second?
I'll
Okay,
second. it.
Liz seconds, sorry. And first, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the meeting minutes for the meeting of February 26th are approved. Next, we have the special budget meeting minutes from Wednesday, March 5th.
And was the 19th a budget meeting as well, I think, right? We had
Yeah, there was the
Regular.
5th, the 19th, and then the regular meeting on the 26th.
I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to accept both of those special budget meeting minutes from March 5th and March 19th.
Oops, scroll too far. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Sorry, I had the thing. Bill, okay.
Bill did.
I'm trying to flip back and forth between the minutes and the screen, so. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and no abstentions? Okay, those two are passed, and that was the 5th and the 19th. And then the last one we have is the regular meeting minutes for March 26th.
I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to approve those minutes from March 26th, regular Board of Finance meeting.
That's Joanne,
Second.
right? Okay,
Yes.
who's second? Bill?
Second.
Got Rob?
I
Okay,
think.
thanks, Rob. Any discussion on those? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Looks like it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, very good. Knock those out. That's important. And, I think we've said this before, and Eric's brought it up, but, if we were to find an error or something we didn't like, there's no reason we could not revisit it. We're just passing it for the purposes of the record and to have it posted and available. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. I do have one thing to say on this.
yeah.
And Mark, this is for you as the chairman. When you come out of executive session, can you state, and you start the recording, can you state on the record when you came out of executive session, and when you restarted the recording? Because
Okay.
the person just has a blank in the file and doesn't know, and you're supposed to state when you go in and when you come out.
Yeah,
Good point.
you're right. Good. Thanks for the reminder. If everybody help us remember that, it'd be good. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, well, that takes us to our next agenda item, which is our agenda item 8, which is board open discussion. This would be a time we would make a motion to set a special meeting for, I believe it's Wednesday, March 8th. to
May
discuss.
May 7th.
7th.
Too many days.
And I so move.
So you move to
I'll
set
second.
Special
a
meeting,
Second.
May 7th,
at 7
Wednesday.
PM.
7
Okay.
PM.
Second.
And on Zoom or in person?
Well, this is just Board of Finance meeting to set the agenda,
Yeah.
right? So,
I prefer Zoom in because it's not really, it's just us really.
yeah, I would agree.
That's
Okay.
fine with me.
Fine.
Okay, so just to clarify the motion, it's a virtual meeting. Any further discussion? Just note that the meeting will be canceled if the budget passes a referendum. We should know that evening. And I'll send out a notice if that's the case. Otherwise, we'll have an agenda. Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Any other board open discussion?
I'm just gonna mention one thing if I could, Mark, very
Yep.
brief. I know the meeting's getting long. No, I sent just, I'm sure some of you saw it, or I sent an email today just documenting that we did hold an executive session. Or we had asked and appeared on the agenda as an executive session at the last Board of Selectmen meeting on April 14th. So that did take place. The members that were present were Kim Person, Liz Lochek, Bill DeRozers, myself, Louise, I believe.
Were all the Board of Selectmen there? I didn't see. anyone.
Correct, yes. The Board of Selectmen were all there, I think, and that's the meeting where the new Board of Selectmen was present as well. So, you can read the overview. I just wanted to
Yeah,
document
I
that
did,
we
yeah.
held it and
Good.
have something in our email referencing, that's our official communication. So I thought it was important to just kind of document that for ourselves that we had requested it. For the most part, the selectmen had wanted us to do it in public, so we did. We gave them the what do I want to say? I'm tired. I'm thinking the respect of just requesting to appear at one of their meetings and bring up a few items. So we thought we'd do it in an executive session, but they asked that most of it be done in the public. We did. We said our piece, had the discussions, and that's it. So I just wanted to mention that I sent everyone an email today, just documented that
Yeah.
we did that. For the
Yeah, I
record.
saw that. It was helpful for me not having been there, so.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's all. I mean,
Anything
I'm sure
else?
there's
for
gonna be
board op-
more coming on some of those things, but we said our piece.
Anything else before the board? Okay, hearing none. The next item is correspondence. I haven't received any external correspondence.
I do have one, and I'll give it real quick. I did talk to get kind of a snapshot from last year from the auditor. He has a very preliminary draft financial statement. But it's still subject to change because frankly, we're waiting on what's called OPEB, which is our actuarial analysis of our healthcare liabilities and a few other things. So hopefully that will be taken care of. That issue is more, the holdup is more on the school side than the town side for that. Although the actuary has been a little bit of a pain to work with this year. We got a new actuary. So the total difference between revenues and expenditures on the town side alone was $406,000. 227,000 of that was our revenues were over projection. Of that over projection, so we brought in more revenue than we anticipated. The major piece of that was the change to the STIF account. The STIF account accounted for $127,000 more revenue than we anticipated for the year. The second big one was because the state did pretty well that year. We ended up with a municipal revenue sharing grant of just about $80,000, which we did not anticipate. So that was the majority of the difference in revenues. Overall taxation, combining grand list, supplemental grand list, back tax collection and fees, we had $31,000 more than we anticipated. Our tax collection between the grand list and supplemental list was short $85,000, but our tax collection was way above average. And that's due, frankly, to Kate has been a lot more aggressive with going after delinquent tax collection.
Can I just I appreciate this. I feel like this is such important information. I hate just hearing it, you know, you are giving it to us. It's good for us to know. And I really, you know, for us to digest it at the end of a meeting, we will. But I'd
Right.
love to see this like in writing or, you know, and I'll still continue to listen, but this piece is very important, you know, so.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to give it to you long before Mike is willing to release the
Because did this
financial
just happen today? Like you got a preliminary call on the audit like today? So we couldn't
Right.
have like a little memo?
Yeah, so I'm reading off of the memo and the notes that I took.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Then I know
And I
we'll
can
see it in
forward
writing
that
at some point.
to the board. I have no problem with that, but realize this is not a finalized audit.
Oh, we
Um,
understand. I wanted to make sure I understood what I was hearing because it's so many figures and I'm all into that, but I'm not retaining them. No, thank you.
Right.
I'll let you continue as long as we see it in writing at some point, and I know it's not final.
Yeah, you definitely will. At this stage, usually what happens is now the town treasurer will go back to the audit firm and will give them a big list of questions and say, hey,
Mhm.
this doesn't seem right. Why did you categorize this? Why is this here, not there? Why did you pull that forward from a previous year? And then they'll go back and forth and make sure they both agree on
Sure.
what's actually there. So for instance, the treasurer gave me like a $365,000 number for the total difference between revenue and expenditure. So so they don't totally agree, but that's normal. That happens every year. So the good news is revenue is up. We know why revenue is up. And the year before, the supplemental list plus the grand list collection was more than anticipated. And this year it was less than anticipated, but we did a much better job of getting back taxes. So overall taxation was more than anticipated. So our revenue forecast, we were over by 1.8% on total revenue, which as far as I'm concerned is a pretty good number. If you back out the STIF account, that's 0.8%. So pretty close agreement between those two of them. On the expenditure side, total expenditure on the town side was $180,000 less than anticipated. But remember, 50,000 of that is contingency. And when you don't spend contingency, it just runs back to fund balance. So really the number you want to be thinking about is $130,000 less than anticipated. Of that, 33,000 was the whole employee benefits category, including healthcare, you know, for that year. $17,000 was the fact that I did not hire a replacement admin assistant when Kate got promoted to be the tax collector. I simply assigned that responsibility to her as a stipend. So that saved the town considerable money in that. $21,000 was our final bill for the resident trooper, was way under our initial allocation. And honestly, the difference between their projected bill for us and what we actually got, they've been over $25,000 and they've been under $40,000 on their estimate of what they're going to charge, because they don't make their final ratio of indirect cost to salary until some point later in the year. So that's the basic variability of that number.
So even if they know the pay rate of the trooper, there's a variable there that applying the overhead that it's not known. Oh, that makes sense to me. I was
Right.
troubled by the fact that okay.
I know, and
I'm happy to have it in our
I feel
favor.
like
but-
I'm throwing a dart at the wall.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm starting with their projection for what the cost is going to be.
Okay.
It's just often not correct. 10,000 of that was elections. We got a state grant that covered last year. They did the same thing that looks like they might do this year, is at the last minute. They gave towns a grant to pay for the cost of some of the early elections. So I think like $7,500 of that 10,000 over was that. 10,000 was the clerk's budget overall was under. And part of that was we were without an assistant town clerk for a period of time. So that was part of it. But it was cumulative among the whole town clerk's budget. 10,000 of that was snow removal. As you know, last year was not a snowy year. We had quite a bit back. And 10,000 of that was the rest of Public Works budget, but they were way under on their overtime. And that's partly that correlates with a low snow year. So that was the majority of the reasons why the expenses were under last year. So if you use the $130,000 number and ignore contingency, that means the town's total budget was about 3.4% under what we budgeted. So that's the high level view of where we are with last year's finance.
Eric, I understand what you mean, but we still budget the 50,000 for contingency, right? I mean, so it's still part of our budget.
Yeah,
So-
and if right, you're
I
right.
understand it's gonna flow back in, but we're still over budgeted,
Right.
by that amount. So it's hard.
Unless one of these years, you as a board decide to make that a permanent fund and then fund it. And then as long as nothing gets expended from that, you don't have to fund it again because it's sitting out there. But I will say that my closest year on expenditures, we used all but like $9,000 of contingency to keep the town's budget in the black. So the closest I've been was off about 9,000.
Wow.
So that's the variability from year to year. Usually part of the reason why I take a hard look at this time of year, because with 1 quarter remaining, a couple of years I've had to really shrink expenses and not approve stuff for the last quarter to make sure we stayed under. So, but that's just this year, we are in pretty good shape. And last year at this point, we knew we were in the clear also.
And so to summarize, you're saying that from the auditor, it was about 406,000 over. And according to Cheryl, it could be 365,000.
Well,
I know
think so Cheryl felt it was, so what they're going to argue about is in some cases, the auditor pulls expenses forward from a following year, or from a previous year, or says, that's not really an expense that's applicable. And this year it's on next year's budget.
Okay.
So there's always some of that in any given budget. Of them deciding how to categorize various expenses.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, that was a long correspondence piece, but it's good information. So look forward to having that finalized. Anybody have anything else correspondence related? Okay, next item is public speak. I do not see any members of the public in the meeting now. So I guess we can move on from that. And the next item is adjournment. Anybody
I
like
move to
make a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn?
I'll
Second.
second
Rob
it.
didn't give me a chance to even say it. I'm sorry, who seconded?
I
Joanne,
did, unless
Both
someone
Joanne
else
and
did.
Liz.
Liz
All
and
right,
Joanne were
Joanne.
like tied, but whatever.
Yeah, okay. Joanne's was first on my scene that I saw, so Joanne second. Anybody, any discussion? Are we sure? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion's passed. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy this nice weather we're having.